Commander Vextel sat in the cold metal chair, his forearms folded across his chest. The bright lights of the tribunal room made his gray skin look even paler than usual. His large black eyes stared at the panel of judges who waited for him to speak. 23 years he had served in the Galactic Coalition forces, 23 years of battles across distant worlds, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw when he fought alongside humans. The head judge, a tall blue Altarian, tapped her claws on the desk. Commander Vextel, you requested this emergency hearing. The tribunal is ready to listen to your testimony about the recent Kepler sector conflicts. Vextel's breathing tubes fluttered nervously. He had put off this moment for months. Every night, he woke up screaming, remembering what he had witnessed. The other alien veterans thought he was losing his mind. Maybe he was, but someone had to tell the truth about the humans. Honored judges, Vextel began, his voice shaking slightly. I must warn you about what I have seen. The humans are not what we thought they were when we first met them 50 years ago. The judges looked at each other with confusion. Humans were considered one of the weaker species in the galaxy. They were small, soft-skinned, and lived for less than 100 years. Most alien races saw them as primitive but harmless. The Coalition sent me to observe human military units during the Zephyri invasion of the Kepler colonies. Vextel continued. We expected to guide them, to teach them proper warfare. We thought they would need our protection. He paused and took a deep breath through his breathing apparatus. His hands were shaking now. I was wrong. We were all wrong. A judge with tentacles for arms leaned forward. Commander, please explain what you observed. Vextel closed his eyes. For a moment, as if trying to push away bad memories, the first human I met was Captain Kim Tae-ho. He was shorter than me, probably weighed half what I do. When I looked at him, I saw nothing special. Just another weak mammal from a backwater planet. The commander's voice grew quieter. The Zephyri attacked the mining colony on Kepler 4 for 2B. Without warning, 3,000 raiders against a settlement of 800 civilians and 50 human soldiers. Any rational species would have evacuated immediately. The math was simple. They could not win. Vextel's scales began to change color, a sign of extreme stress in his species. But the humans did not evacuate. Captain Kim looked at me with those strange round eyes and said, "We hold the line here." I thought he was joking. Then the shooting started. The alien veteran stood up suddenly, pacing back and forth in front of the judges. I have fought in 47 major battles across the galaxy. I have seen brave warriors from dozens of species. But what I witnessed that day broke something inside my mind. He stopped pacing and stared directly at the head judge. A human civilian, named Yoon Soman, was helping with the evacuation. She was just a teacher at the colony school. When the Zephyri broke through the outer defenses, she had a clear path to the escape shuttles. Instead, she ran back into the burning buildings to look for trapped children. Vextel's voice cracked with emotion. I followed her, thinking I could drag her to safety. I found her carrying 2 injured children, one under each arm. Zephyri plasma bolts were melting the walls around us. The heat was so intense that my combat armor was overheating. But she kept running, kept carrying those children to safety. The judges sat in stunned silence. Such behavior defied every known law of self-preservation. That was just the beginning, Vextel whispered. Lieutenant Park Jinwoo took 17 direct hits from Zephyri energy weapons. His armor was completely destroyed. I could see his bones through the burned flesh. By every medical standard in the galaxy, he should have been dead. The commander's breathing became more rapid, but he kept fighting. For 6 more hours, he coordinated the defense while his body was literally falling apart. He used his own blood to mark tactical positions on the wall when his equipment failed. When I begged him to let the medics treat him, he said, "After we get everyone out." A judge with crystal-like skin spoke up. "Commander, surely you are exaggerating. No species can function with such severe injuries." Vextel laughed bitterly. "That is what I thought too. That is what every alien in the galaxy thinks. We are all wrong." He sat back down, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. I spent the next 3 months fighting alongside human units. I watched a medic named Choi Hyjin perform surgery in a collapsing bunker while enemy artillery shook the ground. I saw Sergeant Lee Doyon hold a position for 8 days straight without sleep, eating nothing but emergency rations and melted ice. The alien commander looked around the tribunal room, meeting each judge's eyes. I thought I was observing courage. I thought I was witnessing exceptional individuals. But then I realized the horrible truth. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. This was not exceptional behavior for humans. This was normal. This was how they always fight. This was how they have always survived. The tribunal room fell completely silent, except for the hum of the life support systems. "Honored judges," Vextel said finally, "I did not come here to praise human bravery. I came here to warn you. We have made a terrible mistake." Commander Vextel's breathing tubes made a whistling sound as he prepared to continue his testimony. The judges waited patiently, though their expressions showed they were still trying to process what they had heard about human behavior during the colony attack. The Coalition assigned me to work directly with human forces after the Kepler incident, Vextall began. High Command wanted detailed reports on human military capabilities. They thought the colony defense was just luck or desperation. They were wrong. The alien commander's scales shifted to a darker shade of gray. My new assignment was with the 7th Human Defense Battalion on the moon of Zarian Prime. The Zephyri had established a major base there, and Coalition forces had been trying to remove them for 2 years. Every attack had failed. Thousands of alien soldiers had died in those frozen tunnels. Vextall paused, his large black eyes focusing on something beyond the tribunal room. When I arrived at the human base camp, I expected to find a large army. Instead, I found 200 humans living in basic shelters. Their equipment was old and patched together. Their weapons were inferior to standard Coalition gear. I thought Command had sent me to observe a suicide mission. A judge with blue skin leaned forward. What was your first impression of the human commander? Colonel Shin Woo-jin was nothing like the alien commanders I had served under. Vextall replied. He was young, maybe 30 human years. He had scars on his face and hands. When I introduced myself, he was sitting on the ground eating something called rice from a metal bowl. The alien veteran's voice grew more animated. I expected him to brief me on their battle plans, to show me maps and tactical displays. Instead, he asked me about my family. He wanted to know about my homeworld, my favorite foods, whether I had children. I was confused. We were preparing for war, not making friends. Vextall stood up again, his movements more agitated. That night, I watched the humans prepare for battle. They did not spend hours checking equipment or reviewing battle plans, like other species. Instead, they gathered around small fires and told stories. They shared food. They laughed. The commander's voice dropped lower. I overheard Sergeant Park Min-soo talking to his squad about his daughter's first day at school. Corporal Lee Hae-jin was showing pictures of her new house to anyone who would look. These humans were acting like they were going on a vacation, not a dangerous mission. One of the judges made a note on his tablet. This behavior seems unusual for soldiers preparing for combat. That is what I thought, Vextall agreed. I reported to Coalition Command that the humans were not taking the mission seriously. I recommended they be replaced with professional soldiers. Command told me to wait and observe. The alien veterans' breathing became more rapid. The attack began at dawn. The plan was simple: assault the main Zephyri bunker complex through the valley entrance. 50 Coalition units had tried this same approach and failed. I expected the humans to fail as well. Vextall's claws scraped against the metal floor. The first thing that shocked me was how they moved. Other species advance in careful formations, using cover and supporting each other. The humans ran straight toward the enemy positions while screaming. They made no attempt to hide. The commander's scales rippled with remembered emotion. Private Nam Jun-ho was the first to reach the Zephyri lines. He was hit by 3 plasma bolts before he even reached the bunker entrance. I watched him fall and thought he was dead. Then he got back up and kept running. Vextall's voice cracked slightly. He threw himself on top of a Zephyri heavy weapon position. The explosion killed him instantly, but it also destroyed their main defensive gun. The other humans cheered and kept charging forward. The alien commander sat back down heavily. I had seen soldiers sacrifice themselves before, but this was different. Nam Jun-ho was not following orders. No one told him to make that sacrifice. He just saw what needed to be done and did it. The head judge looked troubled. This suggests a fundamental difference in how humans approach warfare. That was only the beginning, Vextall continued. Medico Sujin was treating wounded soldiers while enemy fire was still coming in. She dragged injured humans to safety, but she also treated wounded Zephyri. When I asked her why she was helping the enemy, she said, "They are hurt." That is enough. The alien veteran's voice grew stronger. Captain Kim Dongmin led the assault on the main bunker. The entrance was blocked by debris and defended by automated weapons. Any sane commander would have called for heavy equipment or air support. Instead, Kim grabbed a plasma charge and ran directly at the blocked entrance. Vextall's breathing tubes fluttered rapidly. The explosion cleared the entrance, but Kim was badly burned. He could barely walk. I tried to convince him to let someone else lead the assault inside the bunker. He looked at me and said, "My soldiers follow me, not the other way around." The commander's final words came out as barely a whisper. In 6 hours, 200 humans accomplished what 50 coalition units could not do in 2 years. They destroyed the Zephyri base completely. But that was not the most disturbing part. Vextall looked directly at each judge. The most disturbing part was that they acted like this was normal, like this was just another day at work. They cleaned their weapons, ate their meals, and went to sleep. They did not celebrate or boast about their victory. The tribunal room fell silent as the judges tried to process this information. That was when I began to realize, Vextall said quietly, that we were not dealing with an ordinary species. Commander Vextall's hands trembled as he reached for the water container on the table. The judges watched him drink slowly, his breathing apparatus making soft clicking sounds. When he set the container down, his scales had turned an even darker shade of gray. 3 months after Zarian Prime, Coalition Command gave me a new assignment, Vextal began. The Zephyri Empire had launched their largest offensive in 50 years. They were pushing toward the core worlds, destroying everything in their path. Our forces were falling back on all fronts. The alien commander's voice grew quieter. The strategic planet of Valdra 7 controlled the main supply routes to 3-star systems. If the Zephyri captured it, they could cut off reinforcements too. A dozen coalition worlds, High Command decided to make a stand there. Vextal paused, his large eyes staring at the floor. The defense force was massive. 50,000 coalition soldiers from 12 different species. Heavy artillery, orbital, bombardment platforms, automated defense systems. It was the largest military buildup I had ever seen. A judge, with tentacle arms, shifted in his chair. What was the human contribution to this force? Outpost Echo, Vextal replied simply. One small fortress on the northern continent. The humans asked for the most dangerous position, the place where enemy scouts had been spotted. Coalition Command was happy to give it to them. If the humans wanted to die in some remote outpost, that was their choice. The alien veteran stood up and began pacing again. I was assigned as liaison officer to Outpost Echo. When I arrived, I found 43 humans living in a fortress built for 300 soldiers. The walls were cracked, the equipment was old, and half the automated defenses were broken. Vextal's scales rippled with emotion. Lieutenant Colonel Bei Vajin was the commanding officer. She was younger than Colonel Shin, maybe 28 human years. She had long black hair that she kept tied back with a piece of wire. When she smiled, I could see that several of her teeth were missing. The commander's voice grew stronger. I asked her when the rest of her unit would arrive. She laughed and said, "This is everyone. We are the Northern Defense." I thought she was joking. 43 humans could not defend an entire continent against a major assault. One of the judges made a note. What were the intelligence estimates for enemy strength in that sector? 15,000 Zephyri shock troops, Vextal answered, plus armor support and air cover. The humans were outnumbered more than 300 to 1. I immediately sent a message to Coalition Command requesting additional forces. The alien veterans' breathing became more rapid. Command refused. They said the northern continent was not strategically important. If the humans wanted to fight a hopeless battle, they could do it alone. I was ordered to observe and report on human tactical methods. Vextal sat down heavily in his chair. The assault began on the 14th day of the siege. I watched through my scope as thousands of Zephyri vehicles moved across the frozen plains toward our position. The ground shook from the weight of their war machines. The sky was black with their aircraft. The commander's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Sergeant Kim Haewon was operating the main artillery gun. It was an old model that required manual loading. Each shell weighed more than she did, but she kept firing without stopping. When the automated loading system broke, she loaded every shell by hand. Vextal's claws scraped against the table. Private Choi Minsu was manning the communications station in the basement. A Zephyri bomb hit the main building and buried him under tons of rubble. We could hear him on the radio, calling out enemy positions and coordinating our fire. He stayed at his post for 3 days while we tried to dig him out. The alien veteran's voice cracked with emotion. Dr. Song Yujin ran the medical station. In what used to be the kitchen, she had no proper surgical equipment, no clean supplies, no pain medication. When Corporal Lim Doyan was brought in with both legs blown off, she used a welding torch to stop the bleeding and parts from a broken radio to make splints. Vextal stood up again, his movements more agitated. On the 5th day, the Zephyri broke through our outer defenses. Half the fortress was on fire. Most of our heavy weapons were destroyed. Any reasonable commander would have ordered a retreat. The commander looked directly at the head judge. Lieutenant Colonel Bei gathered the remaining 31 humans. In the main courtyard, I expected her to announce surrender or evacuation. Instead, she said, "We hold this line. No one passes through here while we still breathe." Vextal's breathing tubes whistled loudly. What happened next defied everything I knew about military tactics. The humans abandoned the fortress walls and moved to individual fighting positions scattered across the compound. They were no longer defending a building. They were defending every meter of ground. The alien veteran's voice grew stronger again. Private Park Woo-jin held the north gate alone for 6 hours against 200 Zephyri soldiers. When his ammunition ran out, he used broken pieces of metal as weapons. When those broke, he fought with his bare hands. Vextal's final words came out in a rush. For 11 days, those humans held Outpost Echo against impossible odds. They never retreated, they never surrendered. They fought until only 7 of them were still alive. And somehow, incredibly, they won. The tribunal room fell completely silent. That was when I realized, Vextal whispered, that humans do not fight wars the same way other species do. They fight wars the way predators hunt. They never give up. Commander Vextel's breathing apparatus hissed loudly as he prepared to continue. His forearms wrapped around his chest, and his scales had turned almost black. The judges could see that whatever he was about to reveal had deeply disturbed him. After the battle at Outpost Echo, I could not sleep, Vextel began. Every night, I saw the faces of those humans who died defending that worthless piece of ground. I kept asking myself the same question: why did they fight so hard for something that did not matter? The alien commander's voice shook slightly. I requested access to the human database on their ship. I told them I wanted to understand their military history, to write a proper report for Coalition Command. Captain Lee Dongman gave me full access to their records. Vextel stood up and walked to the window of the tribunal chamber. Outside, alien ships moved peacefully through space, their crews never imagining the horror he was about to describe. I started with recent human conflicts, he continued. I expected to find records of small wars between their nations, typical primitive behavior. What I found was 10,000 years of continuous warfare, not occasional conflicts, not brief, territorial disputes, constant, endless fighting. A judge with crystal skin leaned forward. Surely you are exaggerating, Commander. No species could survive such constant conflict. Vextel turned back to face the tribunal. That is what I thought too. So I dug deeper into their records. I found documentation of something they called the Great Wars. In just 30 years, they killed over 100 million of their own kind. They invented weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. The alien veteran's claws scraped against the window. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that they kept fighting, even after they created these terrible weapons. They built enough bombs to destroy their entire planet 10 times over, and they still prepared for more war. Vextel walked back to his chair, but did not sit down. I asked Dr. Choi Hyjin to explain this to me. She was one of the survivors from Outpost Echo. She had lost her left arm in the battle, but she still worked in the medical bay every day. Commander's voice grew quieter. She told me about something called evolution. She said that humans did not start as the strongest or fastest species on their planet. They were prey animals. For millions of years, everything on their world tried to eat them. One of the judges made a confused gesture. This does not explain their behavior in combat. That is what I said, Vextel replied. So Dr. Choi showed me images from their homeworld. Creatures with teeth longer than my arm. Beasts that could run faster than our military vehicles. Flying predators that could snatch a human from the ground without warning. The alien commander's breathing became more rapid. She explained that most prey species survive by running away or hiding. Humans were different. When a predator attacked their group, some humans would run toward the danger, not away from it. They would sacrifice themselves to save the others. Vextel's scales rippled with remembered emotion. I asked her why they would do such a thing. She looked at me with those strange human eyes and said, because if we all run, we all die. But if some of us fight, some of us live. The commander sat down heavily in his chair. That was when I began to understand what I had witnessed at Outpost Echo. Those humans were not being brave or foolish. They were following instincts that had kept their species alive for millions of years. Vextel's voice dropped too barely, above a whisper. I spent weeks reading their history. I learned about their wars, their disasters, their struggles against disease and starvation. Every few generations, something tried to destroy them completely, and every time, they survived. By fighting back, the alien veteran looked directly at each judge. Other species in our galaxy evolved as apex predators. We became intelligent because we were already safe. We developed technology and culture because we had time to think and learn. Humans are different. Vextel's breathing tubes whistled softly. Humans became intelligent while they were still being hunted. They developed weapons while they were still prey. They learned to work together because cooperation was the only way to survive another day. The commander's voice grew stronger. I found records of human children playing games that simulated warfare. I found stories they told their young about heroes who died fighting impossible odds. I found music they sang about sacrifice and honor, and never giving up. One of the judges shifted uncomfortably. This suggests their entire culture is built around conflict. Exactly, Vextel replied, but it is worse than that. I discovered that humans have a saying, hard times create strong people. They believe that suffering makes them better. They think that easy times make them weak. The alien commander's final revelation came out in a rush. I realized that what we saw at Outpost Echo was not unusual human behavior. It was normal. Every human soldier I met had the same instincts. They would rather die fighting than live by running away. Vextel's voice cracked with emotion. We thought we were observing courage. We thought we were witnessing heroism. But we were wrong. We were seeing the natural behavior of a species that evolved to fight for survival every single day. The tribunal room fell silent as the judges tried to process this information. That is when I understood, Vextel whispered, that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake in welcoming humans as allies. Commander Vextel stood up slowly, his aged body trembling with the weight of what he was about to reveal. The judges watched him with growing unease, as his scales turned the darkest black they had ever seen on his species. His breathing apparatus made harsh sounds as he struggled to control his emotions. Honored Tribunal, Vextal began, his voice barely above a whisper. I have told you about human courage and their history of survival, but I have not yet told you the most terrifying truth. The humans are not just surviving in our galaxy. They are changing it. The alien commander walked to the center of the room, his forearms gesturing frantically. After my service with human units ended, I was assigned to study the effects of human military tactics on other species. What I discovered keeps me awake. Every night, screaming, a judge with blue skin leaned forward. Commander, please explain what you observed. Vextal's claws scraped against the metal floor as he paced. 6 months after the Outpost Echo battle, I visited a Centaurian military base. The Centaurians have always been cautious fighters, using careful tactics and avoiding unnecessary risks. But when I arrived at their training facility, I saw something that chilled me to my core. The alien veteran's voice grew stronger with fear. Young Centaurian soldiers were practicing human assault techniques. They were running directly at enemy positions while screaming battle cries. Their instructors were teaching them to ignore wounds and keep fighting. They had adopted the human motto, death before dishonor. Vextal stopped pacing and stared directly at the head judge. I spoke with Colonel Zarthok, the Centaurian base commander. He told me that traditional Centaurian tactics were no longer effective against enemies who had studied human warfare. They had to adapt or be destroyed. The commander's breathing became more rapid. I asked him how many casualties they were willing to accept using these new tactics. He looked at me with confusion and said, all of them, if necessary. The humans taught us that victory requires sacrifice. One of the judges made a horrified sound. This suggests that human influence is spreading beyond their own military units. It is much worse than that, Vextal replied. I traveled to 6 different worlds over the next year. Everywhere I went, I found the same thing. Species that had lived in peace for centuries were now preparing for total war. They had learned from human examples that half measures lead to defeat. The alien veteran's voice cracked with emotion. On Kepler's planet, I met with Admiral Vex Mora of the Aquatic Defense Force. Her people had never engaged in ground combat, because they were more comfortable in water. But she showed me new training facilities where her soldiers were learning to fight on dry land. Vextal's scales rippled with remembered terror. When I asked her why, she said, the humans proved that you must be willing to fight anywhere. Under any conditions, we cannot afford to have limitations that our enemies can exploit. The commander sat down heavily in his chair. But the most disturbing change was not in military tactics. It was in how these species thought about life itself. I visited a crystalline colony where the children were playing new games. Instead of puzzle-solving activities, they were simulating combat scenarios. Vextal's breathing apparatus whistled loudly. I watched young crystallines who had never seen violence practicing how to organize resistance movements. Their teachers were using human historical examples to show them how small groups could defeat larger enemies through determination and sacrifice. The alien veteran looked around the tribunal room with desperate eyes. I tried to warn Coalition Command about what was happening. I filed report after report describing how human influence was changing the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. They ignored me. Vextal's voice grew stronger with urgency. 3 weeks ago, I received a message that proved my worst fears were coming true. The Andromedans, the most peaceful species in our galaxy, had declared war on the Zafari Empire. Not a defensive action, not a territorial dispute. A war of complete annihilation. The commander's final revelation came out in a rush. The Andromedan war leader, General Kekstar, sent a message to all coalition worlds. He said, the humans have shown us the truth. Peace is only possible when your enemies are too afraid to attack you. We will demonstrate this principle to the galaxy. Vextal stood up again, his movements desperate and frantic. Do you understand what this means? The Andromedans have never fought an offensive war in their entire history. They have always been diplomats and peacekeepers. But human examples convinced them that violence is the only solution to conflict. The alien veteran's voice rose to fill the chamber. I have seen what happens when humans fight. They do not stop. Until their enemies are completely destroyed, they do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They fight until one side is extinct. Vextal's breathing tubes made harsh sounds as he delivered his final warning. The humans have not just joined our galactic community, they have infected it with their evolutionary madness. Every species that studies their methods becomes more like them, more willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The commander's last words sent ripples of fear through the assembled judges. We thought we were civilizing primitive warriors. Instead, we have unleashed a plague of violence that will consume every peaceful world in the galaxy. The humans do not seek to conquer us with weapons. They conquer us by teaching us to think like predators. Vextal collapsed into his chair, his body shaking with exhaustion and terror. It is already too late to stop what we have started.